Have you ever walked away from a sales conversation thinking, that was a good conversation? They seem to be interested, or I think that might turn into something. But then nothing happens. There's no reply, there's no follow up conversation, there's no clear yes from the buyer, there's no clear no from the buyer, there's just silence. That moment is where a lot of sales quietly slip away. Why? Because what most sellers call a lead was really just a contact. So, what's the difference between the two, a lead versus a contact? It's where your sales either move forward or slowly disappear. Welcome to the Sales Pulse podcast, where sales isn't about pressure and it's not about performing. It's about staying present long enough to know how a buyer actually decides. I'm Marla Koupal, the sales conversation architect, and today we're going to look at why a good conversation doesn't automatically become a sale and what needs to happen for you to grow those sales. There's a myth out there about leads and how everybody you meet is a lead. But you're getting stuck and making fewer and fewer sales if you don't understand the distinction between a contact and a lead. Most people feel a sense of progress when they have a great conversation. They spoke with someone, they shared information, maybe the person sounded interested, and that all feels like a lead, but it isn't. It's a contact point and only a contact. What's the difference between a lead and a contact? A contact is a moment, and a lead is a pattern. Let's talk about that. The contact is a moment, the lead is a pattern. A contact is just one conversation. It's one exchange of information, and it's one point in time that does not lead anywhere else. However, a lead is when you build out that contact. And what you have is an intention to reconnect, a plan for the next conversation, a willingness to continue conversations until there's clarity with the buyer on their yes or their no. Now, if there's no plan to speak again, if no reason is established to reconnect, and if there's no follow-up that actually happens, then there is nothing in motion to lead to a sale. You only have a contact. Why is it so many salespeople can feel accomplished, yet they stall out and don't meet their quotas or even meet goals? This is where selling gets a little uncomfortable. It's not about having the right pitch or having the right information. It's being productive and knowing how to measure that productivity. A lot of people feel productive when they've had a great conversation, or they've sent information, or the person told them that it looked interesting, or someone said, I'll think about it. Those moments create a sense of relief for the seller and a sense of accomplishment. But if the sale didn't move forward, is it really an accomplishment? It's simply a point in time in which you touched someone and it never led anywhere. So from the buyer's side, that conversation is a paused conversation. There is no structure to return. There's no reason to re-engage. There's no next step that belongs to that buyer. The buyer's going to move on. They might even talk with your competitor, get the answers they didn't get from you, and buy from that competitor. There is a huge distinction between contact and lead that you really want to qualify for yourself so that your behaviors in sales can shift. Here's the follow-up gap that's losing you sales. I see this pattern over and over again. The seller will finish the conversation without defining why they will talk again, what will be discussed next, and when it will happen. The follow-up might sound like, just checking in, wanted to see if you had questions, circling back. All of those place pressure on the buyer to restart the conversation, to rethink what it was they talked about with you. and most are not going to help you out. You're making them work, and it's your job to work with them. So, what actually creates a lead? A lead is created when the next conversation is part of the current one. Let me say that again. The next conversation is part of the current one. Now you have a lead. In the current conversation, when you're setting up the next conversation, you might say things like this when you call back. You mentioned you're comparing options. What would be helpful to look at next when we get together? You're thinking about timing. What would make sense for us to revisit with timing in mind? Or you might say, there are a couple of directions for us here. Let's pick one to explore the next time we talk so that you can see if it fits. What's happening? The buyer stays engaged. They have an expectation of the next conversation. Their thinking will continue because they're getting prepared for the next conversation. And your conversation has momentum the next time you start it. The seller always knows where they stand, and the buyer is still involved with you. That's a lead. There's a cost to not making the next conversation part of your current one. Without it, you're going to feel rejected, but the truth is you lost the sale because of ambiguity. There's no clear yes from the buyer. There's no clear no. There's just silence. You could explain silence and make yourself feel better as they weren't interested. Oh, it was a bad lead. It's a timing issue. When in reality, the conversation simply was not set up to continue. If you're a sales team leader, here's something that you want to think about. The sellers you work with don't struggle because they can't talk to people. They struggle because the conversation never fully develops. They connect, they explain, and they disengage too early. And that's exactly where they start to feel like they're spinning their wheels, or they're talking to the wrong people, or they're explaining instead of actually selling. In sales meetings, instead of asking your team members, how many leads did you get? Try things like, how many conversations do you still have in motion? Sales don't come from moments, but from active conversations. Those conversations that are allowed to continue until the buyer can clearly choose yes or no. Hopefully, this podcast gave you something to think about and distinguish in your own selling conversations. Pay attention to how you're ending your conversations. Did you create a contact or a lead? Do you have momentum for the next conversation? Don't be satisfied with how they felt or how you feel they felt or how interested they seemed to be. Keep the conversation in motion. A conversation in motion is a lead and a future sale. Sales will happen when you create that momentum. If you want more conversations that are grounded and built around your buyers, make sure you're following the Sales Pulse podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. And if you know someone who's having great conversations but not seeing them turn into clear decisions from the buyers, share this podcast with them. I'll see you in the next episode.